Okay, so how do we build this thing, right? What happens is here is we are reading this URL parameter. We're then fetching a gigantic data from a server, and then we're filtering the database based on the parameter. All right? Does that make sense? And we're filtering on the client side as well, not on the server side. Honestly, we can probably filter on the server side. Yeah, we can do that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. We've done it, right? So the way to do that is like this. Now, the problem in here is the loading sequences are all over the place, right? Because first data arrives before the URL. You see, the problem with React is because it's like there's components mounting, unmounting, and that creates a lot of problems, right? So first, we need to make sure that the data is loaded, okay? So the way we do that is we use standard fetch method, and we fire this function on load, all right? We then set up a second state with current URL. So inside of this fetch function, we want to run a jQuery that only runs when document is ready. All right. So when document is ready, it will take the path name, right, and set the URL and set the state to whatever the URL you want it to be. When that when once it finishes, it will then set loading to false. All right. Now, next you need to create a use effect. So when this happens, when the state of current URL changes, so when that happens, we know that the jQuery has fired, right? And when jQuery fires, right, we also know that when that happens, right, it means that the fetch data function has finished as well. That means data has been loaded. All right. So we know two things. jQuery has already converted state of the URL to the current URL. So there is data in the current URL. And we know that data has finished. When those two things are done, we can filter, right? So we set a use effect, current URL, right? And then we simply filter data with the current URL. And that's our final output. We create a final state with filtered data. So once data has been loaded, current URL is available, we filter data by current URL, and then we output filtered data. And then this is the final condition is if filtered, so if loading is true, that means data is loading, display loading please. If filtered data has been changed, right, and it's true, that means it's not undefined, then only then we can display elements from that data. If neither of those conditions are true, simply return loading please. And when that happens, this mumbo jumbo is going to work. All right, so it doesn't matter if you put it into, because I had a problem where it worked and then it didn't work sometimes. Do you know what I'm saying? So now it works consistently. Now, honestly, I'm actually thinking of just putting the request into the server and let the server return filtered data. I think this will be a lot faster, right? Because what happens in here is there is different loading times between URL and data fetching. and that causes the problems. Because if you try to directly fetch, if you try to directly filter the data inside the fetch function, the current URL is not yet available. So it's going to try to filter through undefined and return nothing. And then you're going to have a gazillion errors. Okay? So maybe server-side code is a lot better, to be honest with you. All right? Might be better. But we'll see. Take care.